Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the Science, Facts, and Fallacies podcast, episode 299. My name is Cameron English. That's Dr. Liza Dunn.
We're almost at 300.
One
Wow.
more to go. One more to go. I'm going to have those little poppers that shoot confetti. And I'm going
Yeah.
to get some Martinellis. Apparently, because the government says alcohol, there's no safe amount of alcohol. So
Oh my gosh.
X-nay on the champagne. I'll get some Martinellis. They'll probably ban that because of the sugar next. But
That's going to be sugar. Yeah.
yeah,
hmm
in any
You
case,
got to
we're
have,
very excited.
yeah, you got to have everybody telling you what to eat and drink and all of that kind of stuff. They've got your best interests at heart.
I'm quite dumb. I'm raising two children. I pay my bills on time. I pay my taxes. But I'm helpless. The power of Doritos overwhelms my self-control.
That's right.
Um, Incidentally, that's a helpful segue into what we're talking about today. You gave a presentation just a couple days ago for an organization that is excellent, and I wish more people would follow them. They're called the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, FAIR. Now, one thing that sets them apart that I quite love is that they actually mean when they say they're against intolerance and racism, they mean it.
That's true.
They're against it for everyone. And they have been especially curious about some of these scientific and health issues that we talk about all the time. And so they reached out to Liza, and we've lined up a series of talks that we're going to do on different topics. It's sort of like what our spaces have been. We're going to try to take this into another venue, if you will, and reach a bigger audience. But Liza did the first one, and you talked about whether or not our food is poisoning us, killing us, and you got into very helpful specifics about food dyes and pesticides. Pesticides. A lot of it will be review for our audience, but I think it's great because you had a long time to sort of break down all of these issues. So tell us a little bit about the experience. What did you talk about, and who was your conversation partner?
My conversation partner was Dr. Nikki Johnson, who is a wonderful science communicator. And she is very interested she's a pediatrician, and she is very interested in some of the scientific misinformation and disinformation out there. Now, given the fact that lots of people think that the term misinformation and disinformation is code for we need censorship, and you shouldn't be able to discuss things. That's not what she means at all. She's doing the remarkable thing of inviting people who have a perspective that may be different than hers about a scientific topic to come join a civil conversation where the most people can learn and then make a good decision about what they think or policies or how they're going to live their lives based on the information presented to them. So she is open, like we are when we are on our spaces, very open to talking to people who disagree with her. And it's in a very civil, interesting forum. And so this was my first interaction with that organization, but I've followed her on Twitter for a very long time because I think she's got some very interesting and important perspectives on pediatrics in particular. And it just shows you how what a wonderful platform X is for networking and meeting people who can help amplify your message, but also have very, very important scientific discussions.
I enjoyed it. There was a lot of great material. One of the first things Dr. Johnson said when she started interacting was, do you know people that disagree with you? And nobody these days really does that.
That's right.
And especially in the science world, the sort of baseline assumption is that people who disagree with the scientists are stupid or evil or both. And we need to shut them out of the conversation and then tell everyone what to think. And that's going to work.
And we've seen how badly that backfired with the COVID pandemic.
What are you talking
right?
about? During the pandemic, it worked perfectly. Everybody loved that. Everyone loved having their livelihoods threatened unless they took a vaccine. That worked really well, right?
People got very upset. And then they keep on hearing more stuff about what the COVID czars were doing in their spare time. And they're even more upset, right?
What
Because
you mean,
they're
like
holding.
sex parties and ecstasy?
Yeah, right. Exactly. What? Why is everybody angry about that? I mean,
I
come
don't know.
on.
It's not like Health and Human Services is being taken over by crazy people. Like that's not
Right.
you know.
That's good
Oh, oh,
point.
oh, that is happening. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Good
Anyways,
point.
point I'm making is that like these dialogues, if we can help it, are going to engage people who disagree with us. Um, we'll see if that happens. But in any case, these are great. Let's get more into your conversation though. The news of the day is that the FDA came out and banned a red food dye, and so the usual suspects are going, "Aha! I told you this stuff is going to give you thyroid cancer or whatever," and you. Imploded this myth. You just sliced and diced this very helpfully. So you don't have to recapitulate everything you said, but maybe you could just summarize what happened and does it mean that we're, if we eat red food, like if I eat red Skittles, am I going to die?
No, no, no. Well,
Okay, good.
the answer is that yes, everybody's going to die. That's the answer because we're 100% mortal. So, and I don't think anybody's gotten out of here alive yet. But it's not because of the red Skittles, unless of course you eat the ADI of red Skittles, which is the allowable daily intake, and that's a lot of red Skittles, and that won't be because of the dye. That'll be because it's just
Your stomach will explode. Yeah, I
That's
don't
right.
think your local grocery store stocks enough red Skittles for you to do that.
That's exactly right. So that was a little bit of a nuanced, silly answer, but the important point that I think people need to hear, and everyone's hearing that our food system is broken, it's toxic, it's poisoning us. We've got a whole bunch of chronic diseases, and we need to do a big, huge structural reset from the way we grow our food to the way we process our food to the way we eat our food. And the claim is that this is done on purpose so people get addicted to food, and the outcome is that we've got an epidemic of obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. And it's all because of the way food companies and farmers and big ag manage the food system. And it's really an unfortunate perspective because we hands down have the safest, most abundant cornucopia of food and products that we've ever had in the history of mankind. And romanticizing organic farming, taking out things like preservatives, all of the things that they're calling for, getting antibiotics out of agriculture, romanticizing a vegan diet. If people want to choose what they want to eat, that's fine. Go be vegan, go be carnivore. I don't care. The point is that we really need to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Our food supply is monitored, regulated, tested, and is really, really in good shape. There's always room for improvement, but that's the important message to take home. So the claims are that because of excess high fructose corn syrup, because of excess food coloring in our food, preservatives in our food, all of these things are contributing to this chronic plastic in our food, or plastic residues, pesticide residues in our food. These are contributing to this epidemic of chronic diseases, and therefore we need to remove all of them. And companies need to be held strictly liable for their role in promoting bad health. And in fact, there's been a lawsuit just recently in an 11-year-old who has type 2 diabetes against a whole panoply of food companies for the claim that that they've caused his diabetes. So while it is correct to say that there's an epidemic of chronic diseases, the reason why we have these chronic diseases is because we're living past the ripe old age of 5 and not dying of preventable infectious diseases because we have sanitized our water and fluoridated our water, incidentally. We have got food security because we use pesticides and fertilizer and preservatives and a whole variety of technologies to make sure that our food doesn't spoil and give us food poisoning along the way. We pasteurize milk and pasteurize other products where we can get bacterial illnesses from if we didn't pasteurize them that routinely used to kill people and occasionally still do. We have vaccines. We have antibiotics. And those have all been, and we have vector control. We don't get insect-borne illness anymore, and we're not dying from the plague and typhus and other diseases that routinely killed people. So those are critical public health interventions that we've had. So now let's go really to the crux of the matter. We have in our collective memory lost the understanding of what it is to die from these preventable diseases. And we think that way back when, in the early 20th century and prior to that, that was all sort of the golden age of, food. And that what we're seeing is all of these diseases that need research and curing and all of that stuff, which I agree. I think that we need to figure out the root causes of chronic diseases, and we need to treat those root causes and prevent those root causes. But we are claiming that there are trace exposures in our food supply that are causing this, and that other countries don't have these issues. And that's blatantly false. Other countries are getting fatter. Other countries are getting type 2 diabetes at the same epidemic rates that we are. And other countries may or may not have some of these exposures in there. So let's get straight to the point, because I'm sort of wandering around this discussion. But the issue at hand was, the claim was that red number 3 needed to be taken out of the food supply because there was an association with cancer. They said it was a carcinogen. And so when it got taken out yesterday or 2 days ago, got banned 2 days ago by FDA. So the MAHA movement was claiming this and saying it needed to be removed. And when it got taken out, there was a lot of now finally the FDA is doing things to protect public health. They don't use red number 3 in Europe. It's banned in Europe, is the claim. And these kinds of things, we need to do this with other stuff. Well, what's the story behind red number 3? Well, red number 3 is in a lot of products, and so you will have to reformulate those products with another color. I want to say Tylenol a lot of Tylenol products might have it in there. But anyway, long and short is, it does not cause cancer in any way, shape, or form. In order to cause cancer, you have to interact with DNA, because cancer is a disease of DNA. If you get a mutation in the DNA that causes cellular replication and growth over and over and over again, the cells grow and turn and can become malignant. If you don't directly interact with DNA, you're by definition not genotoxic. Okay. The other way you can interact with DNA is indirectly interacting it with it and making a mutation happen that makes cells replicate quickly. Red number 3 doesn't do this. It doesn't do this at all. So why did it get banned? Well, it got banned because there is a legal what's the word I'm looking for? A clause in the Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act called the Delaney Clause. And the Delaney Clause says that, and it seems like it makes sense. It was instituted by Congress, and it says that if a product causes cancer in animals or humans, it needs to be banned. That seems to make perfect sense. But there were one or two studies in which it appeared that rats fed very high doses of red number 3 were getting thyroid tumors, thyroid adenomas. And why FDA didn't ban this 40 years ago and through multiple reviews of this was because of the way these tumors formed. Didn't seem to be anything to do with the red number 3. Actually, in contrast, it was actually due to the physiology of rats, the rats that they were studying. So rats have an enzymatic pathway in their liver where they metabolize thyroid hormone very quickly. And when they metabolize thyroid hormone very quickly, their levels of thyroid hormone in their blood falls. And so that stimulates a response in the brain for hormones to be released to start stimulating the thyroid gland again. And so the hormones in the brain repeatedly stimulate the thyroid gland. Those cells start dividing a little bit more and they get hyperplastic. And then every once in a while can develop adenomas. And an adenoma is not a cancer, it's a benign tumor. Every once in a while from that, because you're rapidly dividing cells, you can get a malignancy develop. So the FDA, for the past 40 years that red number 3 has been on the market, said that this is not a direct effect of red number 3. This has to do with the physiology of these animals. And so that's why they didn't take it off the market. And now the reason why they took it off the market now is because of this Delaney clause. So they are legally compelled to. It's not for a health reason. And this red number 3 is actually not banned in Europe. It's under another name. Andrea Love has actually the name of it. I can't remember it offhand. But it's got a different ADI associated with it. So that's the story about red number 3. There's a lot of panic about it, just like there was a huge panic about plastic, black plastic recently. And we've got to get over the idea that chemicals are causing us harm.
So you tell me rats are different than humans?
Oh my gosh, can you believe
Are you
it?
saying that we're not identical?
and that rats cause diseases in humans. They cause terrible diseases in humans. And carry terrible diseases, yes.
You know, it's funny. This just occurred to me. A lot of the Maha folks, they understand this concept when you attack their favorite diet. So a lot of them are into the low carb, keto, sort of carnivore is the new thing to call it, where you just eat steak and water or whatever. People will criticize that and say, well, that causes heart disease, and they will point out that, a lot of the data for that comes from studies where you force feed animals saturated fat.
Oh.
And they don't eat, well, one thing, they don't eat meat, is my understanding. They eat mostly vegetables. And so when you give them a nutrient that they're not supposed to have, they didn't evolve to eat it, they get sick, surprisingly, right? So those people in the carnivore world, they will correctly point out that these are stupid animal studies, and I'm not going to base my decisions on your stupid animal studies. But then it comes to red dye, and all of a sudden the critical thinking goes away. And, Europe, those people that we actually can't stand, those progressive socialists with their high taxes and all of their goofy ideas, well, they don't like red dye, apparently. So, what, you disagree with the Europeans, Liza? Don't you know who these people are? Right? There's this really goofy disconnect is what I'm getting at, that you have to partition your thinking. You have to ignore your own ideas and your own beliefs, right? For all you libertarians in the Maha movement, what happens when you make companies reformulate their products unnecessarily and you force them to comply with stupid regulations?
The prices go up.
Correct.
And we're talking about inflation, and we're talking about really, really crazy kind of stuff, right? It's access to really important products. And okay, I'm not going to red dye. It's food coloring, and it's safe. So the FDA does not try to hide information about safety. The FDA is there to help protect the population, right? So if you do this with every single product on the market, you're really going to get into a situation where companies can't afford to exist. And we see this over and over and over again. I think we like the idea that there are jobs, and I think we like the idea that there are affordable products, food, medicine, things like that. And the way that happens for the most amount of people is if a company can take a promising product off the shelf of a laboratory and get it through all of the testing required to get it out to the public where it can do the most amount of good. And that process takes a decade or more if it's a pharmaceutical or a chemical product, and costs anywhere from $350 million to $1.5 billion. And then to have all of that work done and to be paying attention and looking at studies over and over and over again for 40, 50 years about these products to make sure that you understand the safety of it, and then have a public relations campaign against it, really makes companies not want to innovate. It's destructive for capitalism. And I know that capitalism sounds like a bad word, but show me another way where you can employ the most people, and give them access to good products. I might be jaded, but I lived in Poland after the wall came down, right after the wall came down, and I saw the literal aftermath of what happened to that country under the Soviet Union. And I saw what it did to their food security. I saw what it did to their environment. I saw what it did to all of this stuff. And we live in a situation that is fragile. And if movements like this can derail your food supply, you've got a big problem.
Yeah, it's tragic. Incidentally, there's an economist, her name escapes me now, but she's from the Soviet Union. And she wrote an article once about what it's like to just experience life in Russia under the Soviets. And she gave typical examples, right? She talked about food, like the limited access to food, and how your life is, every part of your life is managed in essence. And she also gave the example of dentistry. And she said, if you want to know why life in the Soviet Union is terrible, and we don't want anything like it, imagine having a root canal without anesthetic.
Right.
Imagine a dentist drilling into your tooth with no painkiller.
That's insane, right? But
yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah. And so what it forced people to do was to avoid the dentist for as long as possible, which means, you know, the sickness, the infection in their mouth gets worse and worse. And then they get to the point where it has to be done. Mm-hmm. So they just get blasted drunk on vodka, and then they get the tooth knocked out, right?
Yep.
You know what I mean? This is not going to happen tomorrow. Don't get me wrong. We've come a long way. Life here is still really good.
Yes.
But we're playing with fire, right? This is how things get worse, and things can get worse. This is the thing. If you take the tools away from companies that they use to increase efficiency and to produce more of the goods that we all consume, there will be less of them. Do you understand that? You make it harder to make things, there are fewer things. And the prices of things go up. Your standard of living goes down. So I can't stand what happened during COVID. I've been very critical of it. I have, I think, very good reasons to be distrustful of a lot of the regulatory agencies and individual actors in the federal government. But these people who are telling you that they're your saviors and they're going to change the food system, they are not going to help you. They are not going to make your life better. But incidentally, this is one thing I wanted to turn to. And I don't know, I haven't listened to your full discussion yet because it's like an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. So I'm not all the way through it. But one thing maybe you can comment on, if you didn't talk about it there, is the fact that we are taking away from people any sense of autonomy or responsibility, which is another fascinating aspect of this Maha thing, which has this very, not entirely, but it's taking this turn to the right, and it's being pushed by a lot of conservatives and libertarians, and that I can't comprehend either. in that, it's a company that makes red food dye, and it's a company that makes Doritos, and it's not your fault, right? They told you it was safe, and you ate Doritos, and now you're hooked on Doritos, and that, like, we're gonna save you from your addiction to cheese flavored chips. Like, it's just so unbelievable. And the reason I say that is because everyone knows what it's like to have to exert some self control, right? You've talked
Yep.
about quitting to smoke, quitting
Yeah.
cigarettes, and talking to your patients about it. That's hard to do, right? Nicotine is a hard drug to get off.
Yep.
Um, like weight loss is the same way. Any kind of addiction is the same way. But we don't go to people and go, "Oh, poor you. The heroin just injected you, right? It just jumped on your arm and it dove into your blood vein, into your blood vessel, right?" Like, we know that's not true,
Right.
right? What do we tell people when they need to get off an addiction? And everyone mostly agrees with this, whether you agree on drug policy or not. They all say it's the person, right? The addiction is fueled by what's going on inside of them or their experience. The drug is not, strictly speaking, what makes the addiction. But when it comes to things like Twinkies, all of a sudden we're going to go, it's the high fructose corn syrup, right? You just can't say no. It's like, yes, you can.
Yes, you
can
can.
say no. So
Yes,
talk
you
about
can.
that.
Yeah, and that's what's really what they're doing is they're tobacconizing any company they possibly can. They're using the model of the tobacco companies, and they're saying that all companies are bad. They're doing all of these companies are bad. They're hiding information. They're trying to increase addiction. It's very much the same narrative as tobacco companies, and people buy into that argument. And the reason why they buy into that argument is they don't want to do the hard work of decreasing their consumption. Um, I'm sorry, one of the ways that you can get thinner is, and it's easier to get thinner by restricting your calories, not eating it in the first place, than it is to lose the fat that you've already put in with lots of exercise. We are more and more sedentary, and we're over consuming. And I don't care what you over consume. You can eat a steak that's 4,000 calories, and if you don't burn that off, and you're going to build that up, you can be on the carnivore diet and get fat. You can drink a fruit smoothie that's a 24-ounce agave laden blueberry blend. If you drink enough of those, you're going to get very fat. So it's a very simple, boring concept that doesn't sell headlines and doesn't make alt med alternative meds in homeopathy any money, and that's part of the reason why the narrative is going that way. I think it's really, really important to sort of look at things critically. And so you mentioned high fructose corn syrup, right? What is high fructose corn syrup? Well, it's made from cornstarch. Cornstarch is basically a bunch of glucose molecules. Glucose is the simplest sugar that we have, and our body needs glucose to survive. Okay, so what they do is they enzymatically treat cornstarch, or these glucose molecules, with an enzyme that converts some of it to fructose. And fructose is the sugar that you find in a lot of fruits, which is why it's called fructose. And you can do this in different ratios. So the typical ratios are 42% and 55%. And so you'll see high fructose corn syrup being 42 or 55. And then there's water in there. And so basically 2 sugar molecules, different kinds, and water. What are the other kinds of sugars that are out there that people talk about making people heavy? So table sugar or sucrose. What is that? That is a combination of fructose and glucose joined together with a chemical bond. And when you eat it, it winds up splitting into, surprise, surprise, fructose and glucose. And high fructose corn syrup, the one version of it, has less fructose than regular table sugar. Regular table sugar is plant-based. It comes from cane. It comes from sugar beets. High fructose corn syrup is plant-based. It comes from corn. So we're talking about the same 2 molecules across the board. What about honey? honey is fructose. Honey's actually, and a lot of people might get upset with me about this, but it's kind of really bee vomit or bee spit. It's carried around in like this little pocket that's down like their past their esophagus, and then they regurgitate it back into the little combs and the hives. It's kind of interesting to think about. And but honey, everybody's talking about being this miraculous, wonderful sugar substitute. It's healthy. It's all natural. Yes, it's wonderful. It's great. I like honey. But it's also fructose and glucose put together in a different ratio. I can't remember exact ratio. And then agave. Agave, everybody's using agave, and it's, wonderful plant-based sugars. Again, 80% fructose, 20% glucose. So much higher concentration. Now, people are concerned about the way fructose is metabolized. So it's a little bit more nuanced than what the percentage of each of these things are. There's a narrative that's come out of UCSF that I have to admit that when I heard this the first time, I was like, wow, that's pretty persuasive that high fructose corn syrup is terrible. And it had to do with the way fructose is metabolized. So you use a different metabolic pathway with fructose than you do with glucose. Glucose gets into your cells pretty quickly with insulin. But with fructose, you can accelerate the rate of fat deposition. It's associated, I don't think it's very robustly demonstrated to do this, but there are associations with the development of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is fat deposition in your liver. There are metabolic pathways that sort of put you more into the risk of getting gout. You make more uric acid when you metabolize fructose. That said, gout is not really ever been associated with consumption of fruit. It's been associated with alcohol and meat consumption, which is interesting. And so there are claims made about gout and excess high fructose corn syrup. And then there are other metabolites that may be associated with the development of hypertension. So it's that biochemical pathway that is very complex that have shown associations with disease outcomes that have made people very worried about the amount of fructose that's consumed. I think that fructose is fructose. And if it is associated with those things, it's not going to be in doses that are small enough for your body to handle. If you're drinking, once again, 24 ounces 3 times a day of a soda, you may get into that kind of trouble. But if you are, you shouldn't be paying extra for your cane sugar soda because you think you're getting a different kind of sugar. You're getting the same stuff, right? And they're just labeling it differently because you think you're doing something better, and you're actually not.
I was fascinated to hear Rob Wolf, who is, I think he's a biochemist, very smart guy. He's part of this paleo movement, I think. Like 10 years ago or so, he was part of that whole thing, and he's persisted in the health and nutrition space. Really smart guy. But I listened to a podcast that he was on recently, and I agreed with almost everything he said, because he did a Twitter thread where he was saying, the new HHS, when Trump takes office, they need to focus on these things. And one of the things he said they don't need to focus on because they have bigger priorities is high fructose corn syrup. And he explained a lot of the science you just went through. And he just said, when you look at these studies, there's really not that much difference. It's not great for you, but neither is table sugar.
That's right.
Neither is sucrose. So just don't overconsume. And I thought, wow, that's, So if you want to, we got this today at our space, right? If you want to call us Big Food Chills and we're here just to, sell you products or whatever, Rob Wolf thinks the same thing. If you need a hostile witness or, someone on your team, right? If you need to hear from your team, there it is. One final thing, maybe we can move on to something else after this, but this whole thing about food addiction and, these products you can't say no to them. Oh, it's over a decade ago now, but I got dumped by my girlfriend and I was just heartbroken. I was just, right, melancholy and, it's all right, the world's over. Everyone knows that experience. I never wanted a Dorito less in my life.
Yeah.
Than when that happened,
That's
right?
exactly right.
I didn't, I drove by McDonald's and it didn't even occur to me to stop. And my gym attendance went from like 70 to 75% to 100%.
Yep.
And now, let me be clear. I'm not telling you to let your romantic partners dictate your lives. That's not healthy either. But the point I'm hoping to illustrate is that it's very easy to say no to these things when you are oriented in the right direction, when you have the right priorities, you know. So maybe
That's exactly right.
a more healthy way to say it would be like today would be like I try to take care of myself because I have young children, and I want to play baseball with my son, and I want to watch my daughter go to prom or whatever, right? I want to be
That's right.
healthy enough and fit enough that I can participate in their lives, you know.
That's right.
So that kind of an incentive is way more powerful than Pringles, okay? It just
That's
is.
right.
Anyway.
It just is. And I think that the really important takeaway point is that if we get distracted by looking for and spending, dumping a whole bunch of taxpayer money into these chemistries that are very well understood and don't cause harm, and that causes a price of things to rise, as opposed to really finding the root causes of cancer and diabetes and things like that, and trying to figure out getting that research right. It's just a distraction from really doing important research. I mean, people are so anti the mRNA vaccine right now, which could actually cure cancer. There's a lot of promising research coming out of that without chemotherapy. Getting distracted by food coloring and preservatives and dumping all sorts of money into that as opposed to real research is problematic.
Yeah, I give people a little more grace on the vaccines only because the government rollout, at least the messaging, was so beyond idiotic.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to mandate it 3 months later. Okay, we're mandating it and you're fired from your job if you don't take it. And you hate grandma and you're stupid and you're hillbilly. Just kidding. We'll buy you hot dogs and pizza. We'll buy you hamburgers if you get the vaccine. You know, it's just like this. It's like this. We alternate between forcing you to and we'll buy you lotto tickets. But we're gonna make you. Would you like some pizza? Like it's almost as if like the government's run by aliens that don't understand human nature. That's sort of, you know. But that's tragic, right? The fact that this is a promising vaccine platform, and it's going to progress, maybe slower than it would before, you know. But that's been jeopardized to a certain extent, by the anti-vaccine movement, and then also by our own government, who just doesn't understand.
Botched the rollout. They really did.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to keep people too long, but maybe you can sort of wrap up your talk and summarize what your point was.
So my point is that, once again, there's all sorts of consternation about how our food's grown, what's in the processing, what happens during food processing, which is really important for preserving food and not having food go to waste. And then what's causing this epidemic of chronic diseases. This epidemic of chronic diseases is not being caused by dyes, preservatives, pesticides, GMOs, any of that stuff. These things are very well studied, very well understood. This epidemic of chronic diseases is caused by overconsumption of an abundant amount of wonderful food and a sedentary lifestyle. We don't need to go back to and romanticize organic farming. There's nothing wrong with organic farming. It just doesn't reliably feed people. But we don't need to romanticize and imagine that our food in the past was somehow better, more healthy, more nutritious than it is now. So you don't need to be afraid of your food. Everything in moderation. And don't make bad decisions about agricultural policy.
Don't do it. Bad things happen when you take things away that farmers need to feed you.
Yep.
You go hungry. What's the old saying? You know, think a farmer. Without farmers, you'd be naked, hungry, and sober.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I want to be clothed full and occasionally relaxed.
That's exactly
Not
right.
going to say drunk because that's not good for you, but right, just a couple of cocktails to take the edge off
That's
the end of the
exactly
week.
right.
It's good for you. Okay.
That's
All
right.
right. Thank you all for joining us. Go check out Liza's webinar. We will post it when we post this episode. It's on Twitter right now. You can go get it there. It's at Dr. Liza MD. I'm at Cam J English. You can also get the info for our spaces. Those are every Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time. The overarching theme is trust in science. And then from there, we talk about antibiotics in agriculture and opioids. We're going to do one on nicotine pretty soon. GMOs, any kind of public health or medical question or even scientific question you have, we will tackle it. But follow us on X, Twitter, and we'll talk about it there. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.